Hello, everybody. I am Ediginos, and I am going to be doing a breakdown of the 2017 Fall Zelda Randomizer Tournament flags, as well as some general tips to help you through the matches that you will have. First thing that we have is the hint type, which in this particular set of flags is going to be the helpful type. There will always be two caves on the overworld that will contain three hints each that will tell you the location of either an item within a dungeon or what is needed to get to the item. Some examples of that are going to be on the next slide that will break down what each hint can mean. There are also two additional caves on the overworld that will give you the location based on the map of where the white sword is and where the magical sword cave is as well. And then in each level, there is at least one old man. Some of them can give you the perhaps the location of an item or the location of the next dungeon in line. So if you're in dungeon 5, it will actually tell you, where the location of Goma would be on the overworld. So this is a helpful hint breakdown. I'm not going to go through all of it. There's a ton of things, but you can. I'll link this presentation after I get done here and with the video, and this will actually tell you what each hint says, what it means, and what additional notes that will go along with it. So it'll tell you Goma creeps, that means it's level 6, and that could be Goma creeps with the recorder. That means that level 6 will contain the recorder, or Goma creeps in the Lost Hills means that the level 6 will be found in the Lost Hills. And all of that will relate to this map here. As you can see, all up here is considered Death Mountain. This is the grave, so on and so forth. There are only 3 river locations in First Quest. North of level 1, the waterfall, and then down here by level 3. Those hints can be much more valuable than, say, by a lake, which actually encompasses a very large majority of the map and can even include the raft spot. So sometimes can make it a little bit more difficult, and thanks to Fred for this map off of his page. Next is going to be the overworld quest, and we'll be doing first quest. No second quest until the final 4 round. There are 22 total bomb locations, 16 total burn locations with the candle, 1 recorder, 2 raft, 4 power bracelet, and 28 open caves. The important thing there is the 28 open locations, is that is going to contain your wood sword, and some other things along those lines, as we'll get to in the next slide here. Dungeon quest is going to be shapes. This is a little bit different than last year's fall tournament where we had the original dungeon shapes. So with this, basically every dungeon now has a unique shape. So there's never going to be something that's exactly alike. And in fact, level 1 can actually now have segments. Level 2 can have segments, and multiple at that. We've seen level 1s with 4 different areas, meaning that there were actually 4 staircases inside of level 1. It is important to note that the later levels that normally had a staircase, so 5 through 8, will always have their original staircase along with 1 additional per extra segment that's in those dungeons. Way that these dungeons are actually generated is level 1 through 6 share what would be technically like a map. And 1 is generally the smallest, 6 is the largest. That can vary from time to time depending on how the seed is generated. But, one section, basically actually 2 sections of a map are levels 1 through 6. 7 through 8 share basically 1 section of a map. 8 is usually larger than 7, but sometimes that can be flipped as well. And if you get a map of 1, you can actually infer the shape of the other, as it should be the mirror, obviously with just the staircase rooms taken out, which would be the holes in it. And then lastly, level 9 also has its own map where it generates on 1 whole sheet. So some important things about shapes that are kind of a little bit of a nuance. We're playing with randomized dungeon rooms in this particular case. So the dungeon rooms will follow the same drop location. So for instance, in level 1, there is the 2x5 room, which kind of looks like a 5 on a dice. That drop is over on the right-hand side of the room by the door. That location, a lot of times in other dungeons, is not a valid drop location. So that particular room in other dungeons will most likely not have a drop from clearing the room. So a lot of times you can just skip it instead of trying to clear it to get an item and save some time. Another good example of that is the maze room from level 4 in vanilla, where it's just kind of all over the place. It as well is one of those ones where it doesn't have a valid drop location because it's right in the middle of the room, and a lot of times that's not going to contain an item in another dungeon. And probably the most important thing to note for shapes is that staircases will never have an item from clearing the room. It will always be on the floor already. So the most important note of this is the right-hand staircase that can be found in levels 3 and 8 in vanilla. You can actually clear those and there will be a room drop after doing so. That will not be the case in shapes. It has been made so that that is not possible. So if there's not a drop there already, unless you're looking to maybe get a bomb drop or farm some rupees, maybe get some life, it's not worth taking the time to clear. Next up is the caves tab. This is just kind of a quick breakdown of everything that these particular flags do. Shuffle caves, all the overworld caves are going to be randomly shuffled. So a level can be anywhere on the map. The rupees, the caves, and all that sort of thing, money-making game, they're all shuffled around. We've also got whistle to new dungeons on. This is also important because if it were off, you'd be whistling to Vanilla 1, Vanilla 2. In this case, you will whistle to the screen of where the new dungeon was found once you get the Triforce. There is an exception to that. If the dungeon is on a screen where if you were to whistle, it would normally place you in the middle of terrain and soft lock you. It will drop you on a screen that is within one screen of where that dungeon's at in order to keep you from locking up. The Woodsword Cave is shuffled, but it will only be shuffled to one of the 28 open caves on the overworld. This does include the 5 Armos the 5 Armos caves, one of which will actually be taken out to have an Armos, to have the item, the power bracelet item. So technically, it's only 27 possibilities for that Woodsword to be in, but it can still be shuffled randomly between any of those as well. The Take Any Roads, there are 4 of them. They're normally under the power bracelet spots on the first quest map. They can be shuffled anywhere. So they can be on the raft spots. They can be in the very first cave where the wood sword normally is. Sometimes this can be to a great advantage where you can get really good spots to get around the map quickly. Other times they're clustered and they do you no good. But it is kind of nice. You can pop through them and it will actually open up another staircase, even if it's a burn bush or something like that. So if you've got a really awkward start position and you find those, it's worth taking the time to jump through them, see where they are, and perhaps you can get yourself around the map a little bit faster. Also new this time, we actually have start screen shuffle. I believe last time we did not have that. But we've actually got a little bit of a variation. So Fred has taken the time to separate it between easy start shuffle and full start shuffle. And the map here below actually depicts what is available for an easy start shuffle, which is what we'll be using. Everything that is grayed out is not a valid start screen. So you won't need to worry about choke points, level 6, level 2, all these difficult places where if you've got Lionels below you on a ladder, it makes it really difficult to get out. Those have been eliminated for the beginning of this tournament and will make it a lot easier for everybody to move around the screen and get things done. As well as in 3.1.1, Wizrobes are actually removed from some of the more obnoxious screens as well. So that will hopefully help make it a lot easier on these start screens. Next up, we have the Shops tab. A lot of this shouldn't be new to anybody that's been playing Randomizer for any amount of time, but we do have shop items shuffled. Basically, that means that all the items in the shops are going to be shuffled around along with their prices, and there will be a total of plus or minus 20 of their original price. An example of this is the blue candle, costs 60 in the vanilla game, so it could cost anywhere between 40 to 80 rupees in this game. Bombs can be between 1 and 40, which can be really good or really bad depending on the seed. So, gotta play the luck on that one. Extra candles are available. What this means is that the Wood Sword Cave, as well as the Take Any That You Want caves, which have the heart and medicine in them, will also contain a blue candle, meaning that you don't have to scrounge around for a candle shop. Now, it is important to note that there will always be a candle shop available either in an open cave or a bombable cave. It has to be available with resources available on the overworld. So there will always be one available. So even if it's the rare shop, which means there's only one of them, that shop will not be under power bracelet spot. It won't be ladder blocked, and it won't be, under the raft or the recorder spots. It will be available via bomb or in one of the open caves. It also obviously can't be underneath the burn bush, otherwise it would be impossible without finding the red candle. We have changed sword hearts caves on. Basically what that means is that the white sword cave item, as we do have that shuffled as well, is going to be require between 4 to 6 hearts, and the magical sword will require between 10 to 14 in order to pick those up. Money making game has also been changed. The win-loss totals are shuffled. Those can be, pretty volatile. You can have upwards of like 60 that you can win, 70 that you can win. You can also lose up to like 50 or 60. So it's a pretty wide range. There are ways to manipulate the money-making game. Unos has some information on that, I believe, somewhere on his stream, if you want to check that out. It's pretty easy to do. If you could find a way, even if it's close to start, even if it is the start screen that you have a money-making game, if you walk the same way every time and enter at the same interval, pretty much you're going to win every single time as long as you pick the right one. So you can use some save and quit strategies there to help make yourself some money. Bomb upgrades, they've been changed, which is pretty normal for our randomizer. The upgrades now cost between 75 to 125 rupees, and will give a permanent upgrade of between 2 to 6 bombs. So a bit of a gamble, but bombs are, not necessarily a bad thing to have. I don't know what I lost on my slide there. There we go. Shuffle Armos is the last thing that we have under the shops tab. With this being selected, the power bracelet location and stairs will be shuffled among the top row of the Armos screens on the game. So basically, it's always going to be on the top row. So the Graveyard Armos and the Lost Hills Armos, you only need to move the top row. Same with the Blue Ring shop Armos there. And so one of those 5 locations is going to contain the free item, basically, that has been shuffled into the power bracelet slot, which could still be the power bracelet, but it could be the silver arrows, it could be the bow, it could be a boomerang. But the 5 locations are the Graveyard Armos, located at C5, the Blue Ring Shop in Vanilla, which is at D5, southeast of Vanilla level 5, up in the Lost Hills, which is B13, east of Vanilla level 2, which is D14, and then northeast of level 8, which is the other one in the forest at E15. Next, we have the Dungeon Items tab. Again, a lot of this is stuff that is known by everybody, but there could be a few people that don't know all of the rules involved. Dungeon items are obviously shuffled, and what this means is that all of the items have been thrown into a pot and distributed back into the dungeons. And in this case, we've also decided to shuffle the bracelet, the ladder heart, and the white sword. So all of these locations have had their items thrown into a pot, and then they're randomly distributed with a few rules. First off, important items such as the bow, recorder, raft, power bracelet, and ladder, the 5 important items, will never be shuffled into level 9. So that's very important to remember that they will never be in level 9. Also, the important items will never be shuffled into a place where they cannot be retrieved with that item. So the ladder will never be on the ladder heart location. The raft will never be on a raft spot. It's not possible. Otherwise, the whole game could be broken for sanity checks. That's not possible. As mentioned before, the power bracelet has been shuffled into the pot. The place that it cannot be, obviously, will be under a power bracelet location. The ladder heart has also been shuffled in. It can be in any location as there's no restriction for it. And then the white sword has been shuffled also into the mix, which means it can be found in level 9. It could be found in level 1. It could be found in the ladder heart spot, or perhaps in its own cave. If it has been shuffled out, what that does mean is that another item has been shuffled in. So you can find the any key, the bow, you can find any of these awesome items in that cave, and you just kind of hope that it's not the book. Lastly, dungeon drops have been shuffled, and what this means is that the Triforce, the heart, the keys, all of those things have been shuffled around in the dungeon rooms and will not be in their normal drop rooms, which means you will not, most of the time, find the Triforce in its own room. This also means the floor items for dungeons 1 and 2 have been shuffled around in the dungeon as well. On to the dungeons tab. This one's a little bit longer. Shuffle dungeon rooms has been put on, and what this means is that rooms and doors are randomly shuffled in the dungeons. So your doors are not going to be the same. The rooms are switched around. But it is important to note that with the code that Fred put in, the doors are shuffled in a way that it will roughly have the same ratio of door types found in the normal dungeons. So what this means is that, generally speaking, unless it's an outlier, Dungeon 2 is going to have way more bomb walls than something like Level 6, which in the vanilla game does not have a lot of bomb walls. So that's something to keep in mind, that if you're going through, especially in Shapes Level 2, there should be a lot of bomb walls in north, south, east, west that you can use to move around the dungeon. Force Ganon fight has been turned on. It means that you have to defeat Ganon. You have to retrieve his Triforce before Zelda's room door will open. It is closed with a shutter door, and it will not open until said enemy has been killed. This means that it is required for you to collect the bow and the silver arrows to beat the seed. Those are technically the only two items required, though the latter a lot of times is usually necessary to navigate through some of the previous dungeons, or even level 9, as Ganon and or Zelda can be in rooms blocked by a river. Randomized dungeon rooms, those have been turned on, and what this means is that not only will rooms and doors be shuffled randomly within dungeons, but rooms in other dungeons can be shuffled in. And my example here is that Ganon's room can technically be found in level 1. You can find Zelda's room blocking a path in level 6. So those things are shuffled in between, and you will obviously see some repeats of these as well, with the more common rooms. Normally native to second quest, money or life rooms have been added into this particular set of flags, which means that 1 to 3 old men will be shuffled in to the first quest dungeons, and they basically are really annoying because we've also decided to change what can possibly pop up in these life or money rooms. The first option, which is the left option, is always something that can be paid by the player. So it'll be a heart container. It'll be a bomb. I hit my tab button on accident. My apologies. It'll be like a bomb reduction or something of that nature. So the possible costs include 30 to 70 rupees, 2 to 5 keys, which if you've got the magic key is great because it doesn't cost you anything to pay for the keys in that case. 1 heart container, which if you've got 3 hearts, you can actually pay a heart. It'll drop you to 0 HP, but won't reduce your heart. So it essentially makes it free. So if you run into one of those rooms early, that's really awesome. As well as a reduction of 1 bomb maximum capacity, which if you got a great bomb upgrade, doesn't necessarily hurt too much, maybe versus dropping some keys or some, a bomb or, a heart container or something like that, if that's what gets mixed in. Dungeon palettes have been shuffled, which means that there's all new color schemes for all the dungeons. Some of these are a little bit difficult to see. Some are really bright, some are really dark. So, you'll have to adjust your eyes to some of those if they do come up. The Hungry Gorilla has been shuffled in between dungeons. That's the guy that's in level 7 that you got to get the meat to pass through in the original game. It could be anywhere. It could be level 9, level 1. It could be at the bottom corner where it doesn't actually do anything, or it could be right in your way of getting to an important item. So if you run into meat and it's cheap and you've got the rupees, well, it doesn't always happen. There are several cases that we've had where meat is required, and you got to backtrack and find that meat in order to progress through the game. The bomb upgrade men have been shuffled as well. They're normally found in 5 and 7. They've been swapped with 2 other old men throughout the game, outside, I believe, of level 9. I don't remember ever seeing a bomb upgrade in 9, but I could be wrong. But they are shuffled around, and that means the bomb upgrades can be found pretty much anywhere where in the other dungeons. They can even be 2 in the same dungeon, has happened before. So you have to keep your eyes out for those when you run into them. And those on the next tab have actually also been shuffled so that the cost, as we said before, is shuffled between 75 and 125 rupees. So those can be really cheap or really expensive, depending on how your money flow is going. Also added since the previous tournament is the options for level 9. There have been added 1 through 8 Triforces, random, and some other things. In this particular case, 8 Triforces are required, which means you must get the Triforce pieces out of the dungeons 1 through 8 before entry will be permitted into level 9. On the Monsters tab, some new things have actually been added, which creates a little bit of a lot more diversity, actually, not just a lot more diversity in what happens in both the dungeons and the overworld. The overworld monsters have been shuffled. This is an old thing, but basically it shuffles the enemy groups on the overworld, with the exception of the guineas, throughout the overworld randomly. The only exception to that would be if you start on one of the graveyard screens, the guinea will actually start where the normal wood sword is, and there will be 1 guinea there. Dungeon monsters have also been shuffled, which means they're shuffled between the rooms. There's still going to be 3 groups of monsters, and the dungeon will reflect one of those 3 groups or themes of those enemies. Ganon and Zelda have been shuffled as well, which means they are not necessarily one after the other. They are randomly dispersed throughout level 9. They can still be next to each other, but the odds of that happening aren't as large as you would think. Bosses have also been shuffled, meaning that let me rephrase that. Bosses have been shuffled outside of the ones of level 9. So level 9 will always be Patras. They're not, the possibility of Dodongos or any of that sort of stuff in level 9. But in 1 through 8, the bosses have been shuffled, which means you can find a Digdogger in level 1. You can find a Patra in level 1. So those have been shuffled all the way around. So they're, sometimes you get a nasty surprise where you can't get into a staircase for an item in level 3 because there's a Goma blocking it and you don't have a bow and arrows. Level 9 monsters have been shuffled, which is the enemy group in 9, will also be shuffled between one of the 3 that have been created for the seed. Monsters have been shuffled between levels, which basically what that meant is that, there's still the 3 groups, but now Dark Nuts and Wizrobes and all that stuff can be shuffled in together, making it a little bit more difficult overall instead of just having one total theme. Enemy groups have been shuffled, and this is the new thing from last year and has been introduced just recently in the 3.1 update, and that is that the dungeon groups have been shuffled so that you can have different combinations. So now you can have crazy stuff like Wizrobes with Dark Nuts, Pole's Voice, with likes and all sorts of things in the same room. But there again will still be 3 groups. As well, we've also got the option enabled for Overworld Group Shuffle. And this makes things really, really interesting. That means Lynels, Tektites, and Moblins are thrown into the pot, which means you can now find those in dungeons. So you can have Lynels with Pole's Voice in dungeons, or Lynels with Wizrobes. On the other hand, you can also have Dark Nuts and Wizrobes, or Dark Nuts and Lynels on the overworld, creating a very interesting dynamic on some screens, and especially in the dungeons, Lynels can be very difficult to deal with sometimes. And while we don't have HP shuffle on for these particular flags, Tektites with extra HP have some really weird interactions with the game, so definitely will make the game a lot more interesting in that matter. As far as enemy HP and boss HP, we're playing with the normal HP from the vanilla game, so no nasty surprises there. There's no going to be no 14 HP blue Wizrobes or anything of that nature. The miscellaneous tab contains optional flags that are available. These can be on or off for you depending on what you want. One of the big ones that is one of the coolest features that Fred ever came up with is item swap with select. And what this means is you press the select button and you can cycle through all your B button items that you have available. That means that you don't have to menu, which means you save time. On the other hand, there are a few people who don't actually enable this option because they like to use the pause button to navigate through some really difficult rooms, which can also be advantageous if you're really good at doing that. It is very important to note as well that this will change the flags, but it will generate the same seed as if it were on. So if they set up the tournament flags, it's going to be what was on the very first screen. If you if you turn off item select, it is going to change those flags, but do not fret, it will still be the same seed. You can disable music. I do this too. I don't like listening to the game music all the time. I like listening to my own music. So you can disable the overworld and dungeon music, but the other game sounds, the heartbeat, the sword, bomb, all that stuff will still be enabled. There's a Link Sprite Shuffle. This gives you a wide variety of things that you can choose from to play Link as. I would say, and I think others would say, that it's probably not recommended if you're newer to the game and you're still learning to screen scroll to play one of the monster sprites without a lot of practice, because they can make it a little bit difficult, depending on the sprite, to line up properly because of the way that they look, how to do a screen scroll. So if you want to play one of those during the tournament, I would definitely practice a lot with the screen scrolls. That way that you can know the visual cues for those. You could choose a starting tunic color. There's a lot of options, and basically just changes the color that Link starts with on the tunic. Randomize other tunics will randomize the color of the blue ring and red ring tunics when picked up. So you can start with a red tunic. You can pick up the red ring. It can turn green. You can pick up the blue ring and it'll turn you pink. Just a little bit of variety to add a surprise to the game for you, perhaps. Another great thing that was introduced that you can turn off, but is really suggested that you don't, is the speed up text option. This also will change the flags, but again, will not change how the seed is generated. But it really increases the speed of the text of the old men, shopkeepers, door repairs. All of those things will be increased significantly. Definitely not recommended that you turn it off, as there are some really long text options sometimes, and it could take a really long time to move through those. So that's basically the breakdown of the flags for the tournament. I'm going to go into some general tips now that for a lot of people probably know, some may not. So these are, some tips that can maybe help you to increase your times and maybe reduce your frustration a little bit. These are in no particular order, but we'll start off. There's extra wand damage. So if you have the wand, you can buffer the wand with a sword swing to do additional damage, as long as they're vulnerable to the wand. So basically, if you have the wood sword, you could do 3 damage. The white sword, you could do 4. And if you have a magical sword, you could do 6 damage, which is pretty crazy. But if you have a wand and a white sword and you're fighting blue dark nuts, if you buffer this right, you could technically still take them down as if you had a magical sword. And could really save you a lot of time and frustration. Not to mention that the wand hitbox is ginormous and is a lot easier to take on enemies with sometimes. One of the staples of the any percent runs is 10 counts, and this can really be related into the randomizer as well. And basically what this means is that you kill 9 enemies without getting hit. That's the tip. You have to kill 9 enemies without getting hit in a row. And if you kill the last one with a bomb, as long as there's something that normally drops an item, that enemy will drop a bomb. It's forced every single time. It's in the code. It's an awesome thing. It's what makes the speedrun so awesome and makes the randomizer a lot easier to deal with sometimes. Again, the key is you cannot be hit. You cannot be hit as you're bombing. You have to get 10 in a row without being hit. You can also force a 5 rupee with this if you use the wand or the sword on the 10th enemy, if you're trying to get money and that sort of thing. You can also store the rupee or the bomb if you say bomb a keys or something like that, and or a like, or you kill them with the bomb, or you kill them with the sword. It will store it for the next enemy that then has a drop. So if you kill a Keese and then you go kill a Zol and you've got a white sword, it's going to drop a bomb even though it's technically the 11th enemy that you killed. But you cannot be hit. That's the key. You cannot be hit before you get that force drop. Otherwise, it will erase it. Helpful hint caves. You want to definitely mark down where these are at, and then I'll go into the good tracking method, which is next. But mark down where the hint caves are, and if they're close to the start location, a lot of times it is worth hitting the save and quit and going and checking those and then retrying. You'll get all your money back. You'll get the great hints. Hints are super important in this. We do have helpful hints on for this round, again, as I stated before. And, a lot of times you'll get something good. Sometimes you won't. You'll get 3 crossing the waters, and it doesn't do you a heck of a lot of good. But sometimes you'll get the location of the silver arrows and the bow and the red ring, and just like, you're in go mode. You don't got to worry about anything else anymore. So that's really important to track. And sometimes it's worth taking a long trek, or even if it is a long trek and you don't want to take the time to save and quit, if you've got the money and you're feeling confident, a lot of times it's worth buying those hints. Moves into our next, have a good tracking method. I personally use pen and paper with basically with a laminated map and a dry erase marker. But there are a lot of options for tracking, and you can use just regular paper. You can use Excel spreadsheets. If you like using computer resources, there's an awesome one by Quest Wizard called Z Helper. He just released version 4. It's got hotkeys and all sorts of killer stuff on it. He's done a lot of work on it. It's a really great job. Really awesome guy. Has done a lot for the randomizer community as far as creating layouts that are easy to work with for restreaming and such. So be sure to drop by and check that out. It's at questwizard.net/zhelper. Great resource. You'll see a lot of people using that. There's a lot of different things you can do with it. Next up is block clips, ladder clips, and screen scrolls. In increasing difficulty, basically. If you can't learn to screen scroll and ladder clip, it's still very recommended that you learn to do block clips. You can buffer those with the sword. If you go to redcandle.us/The Legend of Zelda, the link is in here. There are pictures set up to help you figure out how to do that. and it's worth practicing. The block clip is extremely important simply because you can get into a diamond staircase without clearing the room, which means if you've got blue dark nuts or you've got a boss or something like that, you can skip through having that. So even if the recorder, there's a dig dogger and you don't have the recorder, you can get into that diamond staircase by clipping in, and therefore saving yourself a lot of time. It is important to note that it was never required to do any of these methods to beat the seed. So that means that to get to that item, the recorder is available somewhere to do that, but that just skips a step and saves you a lot of time. Ladder, and also you could do that in other rooms too. So like you can get through the diagonal, room with the blocks. You can clip through there if it's a difficult room and get around. There's some other places that you can use it to help navigate. So it's a cool thing to have and definitely worth learning. It's not very hard. Ladder clips are definitely more difficult to line up, but very good thing to know if you can get them down. It allows you to world wrap, which means that you could go from the graveyard side of the map, clear over to the coast side, not only pick up the item that's there, but also just be able to navigate quickly to that side of the map if you need to, if you, don't have another way to do that. And then also there are the T rooms found in like level 4, level 5 of vanilla that can sometimes block your way. And if you have the ladder, you can save yourself of finding the staircase to get up to that portion, or just, if the Triforce is in that room and you need to get across, it saves you a lot of time. Screen scrolling, definitely the most difficult thing to learn. Requires you to be on the 5th pixel. You can only one frame tap. It's a little bit difficult to do from the right to the left. The left to right, you can sword buffer, but it's still a little bit difficult. This is one of those things that comes over time, and it can be very frustrating. Some learn faster than others. A lot of it's controller dependent too. If you got a controller that doesn't like one frame taps, you're gonna have a really hard time with this type of thing. But it's definitely nice to learn. It allows you to navigate some really cool ways around the overworld. You can, over on the graveyard side, you can, screen scroll over to the Blue Ring Armos, or you can screen scroll from the Deadwoods and get over to the graveyard. You could get through some really difficult screens. You can screen scroll over to level 5. That way you don't have to walk up, the ladder 5 times. There's a lot of really cool things that you can do. And it's just a really good skill to learn to increase your time, or actually decrease your time rather, in the randomizer seeds. Moving on, bailing on dungeons when needed. So early on, it can be very tempting to go through dungeons and try to find stuff. And that's all good and well. But, if it's one of the harder dungeons, like 7 or 8, you could peek in, maybe find a key or two, but don't keep going and dying and wasting time. With limited resources and equipment, it's usually not worth the amount of time that you invest into those dungeons to try to get things done. Also, if it's a really tough dungeon and maybe you do find the item and you've got, say 4 hearts and a wood sword, but you got to deal with Wizrobes or something like that, or Lionels that are just, making it really difficult to get through the dungeon to find the Triforce. A lot of times it's worth leaving and coming back later when you've got better resources to get through the dungeon, so you're not dying as many times. Deaths cost a lot of time. Yes, while you're leaving and you do have to go through the dungeon, if you go 10 rooms in and you die and then do it again, you've basically wasted twice as much time. Which brings to the point of early Triforces. Early on in the game, if you go into a level, it's level 7, 2 rooms in, you find a Triforce. Maybe check the rooms next to it, but take it and leave. You can always come back, and early on, you haven't found anything in the game. So it's not necessarily a bad idea to just take that Triforce and leave. And if it turns out that you have to go back for an item, so be it. But if it doesn't, that's all that time that you saved looking around for an item that didn't matter in the end. And really, you're not wasting time unless it is an item you need. So you just take the Triforce, you find what you need in level 1. Hey, I just saved myself going through 20 or 30 rooms that I didn't need to mess with. Also new, Pole's Voice Epidemic. With the new switch around with the shuffle of the enemies between groups and the overworld and everything, and the randomization, Pole's Voice seemed to be everywhere. They're mixed in with random groups, and now there can also be up to 8 enemies in a room. This includes on Wizrobes. This includes Pole's Voice, Lionels, the whole 9 yards. So there's a lot of room for there to be Pole's Voice inside of a room, and a lot of times it can be difficult to try to navigate through these guys. So if you find the bow early, especially if you find the bow early, buy arrows if you see them and you got the money. Even if you don't have the bow, it's usually worth buying arrows so that when you do find it, you don't have to mess with the Pole's Voice anymore. There are some dungeons that I had where every room was 6 to 8 Pole's Voice, and you had to clear it to do anything, and it took forever with a wood sword. If I just had the arrows, I wouldn't have had to deal with that. So bow and arrows early if you've got it to help take care of Pole's Voice. All right, the Kanana key. So this was found by Kananaphone in, I believe, actually the previous tournament. It's a fantastic trick, especially with what seems to be a massive key drought lately in seeds. So if you're low on keys, in fact, have 0 keys, this is the trick for you. But it does require some setup. It can be difficult to pull off at times. First of all, the room must have a shutter door. So if it doesn't have a shutter door, you can't do the Kanana key. So basically what you want to do, if you've got a shutter door and a key door and no keys, kill all but one enemy in the room. Preferably with this shuffle, an easy enemy to kill. Even one that probably moves towards you would be best. You're going to want to stand by the key door that you want to go through, and then you have to kill the enemy, and while it's dying, push your way through the door. And what happens is while the game is opening the shutter door, for some reason it allows you to pass through the door with no keys. This obviously could be very difficult when dealing with things like Wizrobes or Dark Nuts or Pole's Voice or things like that that take a lot of hits to kill or maybe move sporadically throughout the room as you need to be standing by the door to do this. But if you can make it work, I've seen several times where somebody doing that in the last tournament actually made a huge difference and basically won them the game because they Kanana keyed through and their opponent did not have the keys to get through there, and it contained, I think it was the latter, which really set them ahead. Marked, and going along with the key theme, mark down key in bomb shops. It's very important. You never know when you're going to need an extra key. If you've got extra rupees, you never know when you're going to need bombs. There's a lot of times when you cannot get a bomb to drop. It's super frustrating if you just mark down some bomb shops, especially if they're cheap. It's a great way to get yourself refilled, get the exploration of the overworld going, or to dive back into the dungeon that you need to finish exploring. Pirouettes, if you've watched any percent runs, you know what this is. In level 1, you walk in, you walk out, you walk back in, and the key door to the north magically unlocks. For some reason, the game thinks you're actually walking through the door from the top and removes the key for you. So this is a great way to save a bomb or to save a key, especially with the key issues, if you're having them, by walking into a dungeon, walking out, and walking back in. You can also do this on the east and west walls as long as you have the ability to scroll the screen completely. So, for instance, if you were to walk into level 1, vanilla level 1, and it had a dungeon, if there was a key door or a bomb hole on the right-hand side, you can transition back to the bridge, walk back in, go in, and it would open it for you. However, if it were on the left-hand side, since you cannot transition the screen that way, you would not be able to open that door without using either a key or a bomb. Routing efficiently, obviously going to depend on the start screen that you've got, but efficient routing is one of the skills that you learn as you play a more randomizer. Where should I go? While there is luck involved in finding the sword, at the same time, you want to maximize your efficiency. So even if you don't have the sword, if you manage to get a candle out of a Take Any cave, and you somehow manage to get bombs off your first enemy, while you're still looking for a sword, it is very smart to go ahead and clear whole areas at a time so that even if you find a dungeon, you don't have to go back and you don't have to clear all that stuff. You're not thinking about it. You can mark it off your list. You can check it off on your map, on your tracker, and you're not going to have to go back and re-clear all these areas and walk through them multiple times to open up the caves to find what you're looking for. On that note, the start area is a very good place. There's a lot of open caves there, but more importantly, the northeast is a really good place to go. You've got a lot of open caves, and then you've got the Lost Hills and the 2 Forest Armos, giving you a 60% chance to find that free item in, underneath one of those Armos, which could contain a sword, it can contain a boomerang, it can contain something useful. So it's always worth probably heading up that direction if you can, in order to try to maximize your efficiency that way. The Take Any caves and bomb shops, again, going with the previous note, if you find a Take Any cave, the heart's always tempting. You want to be able to get the White Sword Cave item. You want to build towards that magical sword, but Getting an early candle, one, if you don't have a sword, unlocks the ability for you to possibly get bombs off of blue Octoroks or blue Moblins, but also allows you to burn those burn bushes as you're walking through the forest, saving you backtrack time and all those sort of things. While you're walking through the forest to get to those 2 open caves trying to find the wood sword, you could be burning along the way, finding an extra heart container, finding a level, finding, money or whatnot, or hint caves to help you progress through the seed. Same thing with bombs. If you find a secret early on, you find some cheap bombs, even if they're not cheap, even if they're 39 rupees and you've got 40 rupees, it's worth buying that first bomb pack. If you're going to the northeast, it allows you to bomb, Monocle Rock next to it on the coast and the other 2 locations, and you can completely take out the northeast and not have to go back there unless there's a dungeon. So Hungry Gorilla and Life or Money Secret Doors. Those 2 rooms, they're shuffled. They're add in all the Life or Money rooms, and the Hungry Gorilla has been shuffled. Those rooms can actually have bomb walls behind them. So if you're stuck in a dungeon and you can't figure out where to go and you've bombed everything, nobody wants to pay early on, especially keys or hearts or rupees or bomb upgrades or anything to a Life or Money room. So you usually up and A out of it, even if it's a bit into a dungeon. It could be that the only way to get through that dungeon is to bomb north out of that wall. So keep that in mind. All right, Rico the Tutti Flute. So this is basically how the recorder breaks down. There have been a couple of people that I've been watching running some seeds, and they don't know how the recorder works, so I thought I threw this in here. So basically, the recorder, it works in a static way. It always does the same thing. When you first get it, it starts on 1, and there's 1 through 8 on basically a counter. If you whistle right or you whistle down, it will increase the counter by 1. If you whistle up or left, it will decrease it by 1. If you have all of the Triforces. So basically, if you have 1 through 8 and you whistle to the right twice, it's going to take you to 3. However, if you do not have all of the Triforces, it acts a little bit differently. So it will still increase by 1, but it will go to the next Triforce you have. So my example here is, if you have Triforces 1, 4, and 7, if it's the first time you're using the whistle, you're already on 1. So you want to get to level 7. You could either turn left and use it once, and it will take you from 1 to 7, or you can use it on the right side, turning right or up, or right or down rather, and go from 1 to 4 to 7 on the counter. And once you do that, your session, you're set on 7. So the game remembers where you are on that counter. So even if you had a new Triforce, as in this example, you get the Triforce out of 2, and you want to go back to level 2 later on. If you haven't used the recorder anywhere else, you're still on 7 on the counter. So you would need to use the recorder twice in either direction in this case, left or right, from going to 7 to 1 to 2 or from 7 to 4 to 2 to warp to that location. And again, it just remembers where you're at, and it just increases it by 1 to the next dungeon that you have actually gotten a Triforce out of. And as previously mentioned before, with the cave shuffle, the recorder sometimes would place you on a screen that's different, and that is because, say for instance, the dungeon is in the letter cave, where you normally get the letter. Whistling there is going to soft lock you because you're going to drop inside the rock. So it actually drops you on the screen below. That way you do not get soft locked, and you can actually still use the recorder to get to that level. So basically that's how the recorder works. It's pretty straightforward. It is extremely useful. It saves you a lot of time, especially if you got to go back to a dungeon in order to try to find an item, or just to get to another dungeon around around the map or whatnot. Arrows. Most people know this, but it's just one of those things I added. I call it the better boomerang, even though it costs you a rupee. You can shoot an arrow to pick up any item that's dropped on the ground by an enemy. So bombs, rupees, fairies, the whole 9 yards. You can shoot an arrow and it'll pick it up for you. Will not pick up items that are dropped in a room. So if it's a bomb drop in the room or a key drop in the room, it will not pick those up when you shoot it. You still have to go pick those up. You can also use the sword for those enemy drops as a small extension to help pick those things up. And lastly, for this portion, the player reset button. And I have a lot of problems with this, and this is just one of those tips that I've learned. Zelda 1 is a pretty hard game, really, honestly. And a lot of times the randomizer makes it harder. You've got the enemy shuffles, you've got the dungeons all over the place, you're looking for a sword. It can be frustrating. So when that happens, it's always worth taking a moment to just refocus reset. Don't let the frustration get to you. Because I remember early on, I would just get really frustrated over and over and over again. And a lot of times, there's some seeds where it's really bad and I've made really bad decisions and it just keeps compounding and I keep making bad decisions over and over and over and over again. So basically, just calm down, reset, refocus, and start playing your game again and try to figure out what it is that you need to do instead of being so focused on all the things that are going wrong. So, just a tip from me. I've had that issue, and I know some others do too. Just refocus, and things will start to get better. So basically, what this screen's about is silver arrows and whether or not they're a 9. And whether or not to gamble. So this kind of breaks down what the probability is of this silver arrows being a 9 based off of what you've already found. So in these particular flags, we are shuffling the white sword and we are shuffling the ladder heart. So those are thrown into the pot on where silver arrows can be. And we're actually also shuffling the power bracelet, but that's a required item, so that makes it a little bit different. The bow, the recorder, raft, power bracelet, and ladder can never be a 9. We've said that before. So based off of that, you can just wipe those off. You know that those are never going to be a 9, which leaves a possibility of 10 items available that could be a 9. So for every non-important item you find, you can start ticking off on this list. So if you found 4 non-important items, that means there are 6 possibilities left that could be in level 9, meaning that there is a 33% chance that the silver arrows are there. And as you start moving on up, you can obviously infer there's a much better chance. If you found 7 non-important items, that means that there's a 66% chance that the silvers are in 9, probably worth going in there, because not only are you trying to find the silvers, but you're mapping out 9, you're finding where Ganon is, you're finding where Zelda is, so you're doing a lot of things at the same time. Whereas if you're digging that one last dungeon, you might strike out and you'll just fall way farther behind. Lastly, this is knowing your drop tables. This chart was provided by Baxter at Task Videos. This is also up on the Red Candle site, but this is something that's definitely worth either having up on your screen or printing out and having available for you to look at. It's important to know when your drops are coming, especially for bombs, because that's the main thing. The B group is the only group that drops bombs. It drops them on the global at 1, 6, and 8. And it's very important to know that and which enemies actually drop bombs, which, as you can see in the B group, there are blue Octoroks, blue Moblins, blue Lionels, red Gorilla, Gibdos, Vire, red Darknuts, and red Wizropes. Those are all the bomb droppers in the game. So it's important to know where you're at. You start at 0 on the global counter and you go up by 1 for each kill you make. The only exception to that is the really rare case of where if you kill a Zol and Gel at the very beginning of the game before you kill another enemy, it actually will not increment the counter. But in that vein, it is very important that you try to make your first kill always be something from the B group, so that you will have a chance of getting that early bomb drop so that you can start exploring caves a little bit better. But basically just using this chart, if you're killing a room full of red Gorilla, and your last 2 drops were 2 hearts, you know that you're now at 0 on the counter again, which means when you go to the next room, you want to try to kill a bomb dropper next if you're low on bombs, as that will be your bomb chance. And you can infer other things. If you kill something in the A group and you get a fairy drop, that means that in 2 drops you'll have a chance to get a bomb. So it's just really important to know all the things going on with this drop table, so that even if you're trying to force, you can maybe just get a lucky bomb. But that's all I've got. I thank you guys so much for watching. I will link again this whole PowerPoint so that you could go through it piece by piece if you want to. I will do another short one for the changes coming up in the bracket round. There were 4 changes that we'll go over. But again, thank you all so much for checking this out. Hopefully it was helpful, and I hope that you all have a fantastic day, evening, or night.